Flows are the engine of your email marketing. Done right, they run 24/7, compounding revenue automatically. But done wrong, they are going to overlap, send too many emails, desensitize your audience, and that's where a lot of brands see revenue drop because their audience just is desensitized now. So in this video, I am going to walk you through the technical side of Klaviyo flows and teach you the core skills needed to build any flow you'd like, absolutely any flow you'd like, whilst keeping your account clean and avoiding oversending to people. This video is not about email copy or email design, it's specifically about the technical side so that you have the skill to build any flow from scratch at will. So this is the Flows Engineering Masterclass. After you master this, you are going to have a superpower where you can set up automated flows that will keep running forever, targeting any group you would like. So let me give you an exaggerated example so that you can understand how powerful this is. Let's say you decide you want to have an automated sequence to people who bought a chocolate flavored protein powder, let's say, and they are located in X country, let's say Australia, and they have only purchased one order over all time. You can keep going over the conditions and how personalized you want the flows to be. You can set up automated messaging, automated emails that you have personalized, dedicated to that specific group of people. So yeah, that is an extremely high leverage skill. So this is what I am going to be teaching you. First of all, let's hop onto Klaviyo because that's where flows are built. And let me show you how everything works. You simply go to flows, you click on create flow, of course. Don't bother with this. These are templates created by Klaviyo. It's actually easier to build from scratch once you know how to do them, instead of starting from a template and trying to change it. So you are going to click on build your own. And here, just write the name. Now you are going to be presented with trigger options. Ignore the recommended one, ignore your metrics, simply go to all metrics. And here, just like segments, you have the ability to trigger a flow with a list, with a segment, or a metric. Okay? Ignore date property. I've never had to use this, even though I use Klaviyo every day for the past 3 years. I've never had to use this, so ignore this. So you've got list, segment, and metric. These are the main three. So if you haven't watched the video about segmentation, I really recommend you watch that video first and then come back to this video if you really want to master flows engineering. So you can use these three things to trigger a flow, to make a flow start sending emails to someone. I am going to go for segment because those are the most flexible, and in the end I'm going to explain why we go for metric triggered flows sometimes instead of segment triggered, because there is a limitation which I'm going to talk about at the end. So let's just say I want to send an automated sequence of emails to this segment. Click save, confirm. Okay, now the trigger is locked. You can't change it anymore. If you want to change the trigger, you will have to clone the flow and change the trigger. And what's worse is if you select metric, okay, and you actually wanted to select segment trigger, even if you clone it, it's not going to allow you to switch between trigger types. Okay, you can't switch between trigger types, so you will have to remake that flow from scratch. So just be careful before you start building. Make sure it is the correct trigger. So next, you have a very important thing called profile filters. Okay, I think the easiest way to explain this would be to actually make the abandoned cart flow, because that would be easier for you to understand. So abandoned cart test, create flow, all triggers, metric, let's do this, checkout started. So this is how the abandoned checkout flow would look like. Okay, it gets triggered when someone starts the checkout process. Of course, there would be a time delay here, of like 1 hour, so that it doesn't send an email straight away as soon as you start the checkout. Okay, but you want to be careful with flows like this, because if they started checkout and they place an order, you don't want them to receive the checkout flow because they already placed an order, right? So to avoid sending emails to those guys that already placed an order, already completed their order, you want to add a profile filter. So let me just add one and then I will explain. So in this case, we would need to do what someone has done or not done. So metric, placed order 0 times since starting this flow. So yeah, we are going to add this. So let me explain this to you. Whatever you see here, okay, whatever you see here, think of it as this. If the answer to this definition is yes, then they stay inside of the flow. But if the answer of this definition is no, if they don't match this definition or this filter, then they get kicked out of the flow. So, placed order 0 times since starting this flow. Yes, if it's a yes, they haven't placed an order, it's 0 times, then they stay, they're safe to stay. But if this was a no, they would automatically get kicked out, they would automatically exit the flow. Because of this filter, it doesn't matter if it's straight away within 1 hour or after a few days. Because it's a profile filter, this applies to the entire flow. As long as they are inside of the flow and this becomes a no, they no longer match this criteria, they will automatically exit the flow. Okay. And then another one that we have to add is this one, has not been in this flow in the last 30 days. That's what we use for the abandoned checkout. Because if someone starts checkout and then comes the next day and starts checkout again, you don't want them to receive the abandoned checkout flow twice. Okay, you only want them to receive it once and keep receiving the sequence until they finish it. That's why we want to add this filter so that they don't re-enter before this time frame finishes. Okay, and yeah, that's how profile filters work. Similar to segments, you can basically have any combination of lists, of metrics, of properties, right? Again, if you are unsure about what these are, I explained them in depth in the segmentation masterclass. So that's profile filters explained. Now let me go over the available blocks when building the flow. So first of all, I'm going to cross out all of the unnecessary blocks that I've never used and you are never going to use unless you're doing some API stuff or some weird stuff. So first of all, list update, never had to use this, ignore. Webhook, again, I've never had to use this. This is only used if you want to create custom integrations with other apps and trigger flows on them. Never had to use this. Internal alert, ignore this. Trigger split, ignore this. Only focus on email, SMS, profile property update, time delay, and conditional split. So let me explain each one of them. Email, very simple. You just simply drag an email block, and here you can set up an email. Okay, so you can do that. Click on create, and then you can build your email here, import it from Figma, save it, add your subject line, preview text, send the name. You can add an internal reference name for that email. That's what this is for. Click done. That's one email setup. Okay, and then inside of this block, you have a few settings. You have smart sending, which automatically skips profiles that have received an email in the last 16 hours. You want to keep this turned off for important flows like the welcome flow and the checkout flow. You can keep this turned on for any other flow that you have running in the background. But when it comes to the welcome flow and the checkout flow, keep this turned on, keep this turned off, sorry. And then for each email block, you can add filter. So this is super cool. Not only can you add filters for the entire flow, you can even add email specific filters. All right, so email specific filters, again, same thing as segments and flow filters. You can create a definition of who should receive this email. If they don't match this definition, they are simply going to skip this email and receive the next one. So this allows you to have full control over the emails and the flow. Okay, and yeah, that's the email block. SMS, if you want to set up SMS, right, similar stuff. And then you have profile property. This is, you probably will never have to use this. We use this because we have some advanced flows. But let me think of a use case where you would have to use this. You know what, leave this. You don't really need this. But just for you to know, you are able to update a property about someone from this. Okay. Next, you have time delay, of course, very simple. And the cool thing is, you can do minutes, you can do hours, you can do days, you can even delay until a specific time of day, right? And you can even delay until specific days of the week. This is super useful because in the long flows that we set up, for the educational flows, we send them on Mondays and Fridays. And for the promotional flows that contain offers, we send them on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and the weekend. So this just keeps everything synced and organized across the entire account. So yeah, that's the settings available. And then you have conditional split. This is useful for A/B testing and personalizing emails. So let's say on the pop-up, you asked them a question like, what's your goal? You had 3 options. Option 1 was lose weight. Second option was maintain weight. And the third option was gain weight. Here, you can have different emails based on what they answered. So you would simply look for property, look for the property that you set when setting up the pop-up. If you haven't watched the pop-up video, also go and watch that one, super useful. So your pop-up question equals, and then you can select what answer it should be. If it's a yes, they are going to receive this path. Okay. If it's a no, then you want to add another conditional split. And again, select properties about someone, pop-up question, and then select the second answer option. If it's a yes, they are going to receive this email. If it's a no, they're going to receive the third answer option. But actually, just to be careful, you should add another one. So if there are 3 answer options, add 3 conditional splits and leave the last path for profiles that don't have, that did not answer that question. Okay, so have a more general email here that's not anchored to a specific answer. Because sometimes if profiles are coming in through the checkout, or they simply gave you their email but did not answer the next step, which was the pop-up question, you don't want them to receive the incorrect email, because sometimes in the email you want to personalize them and say stuff like, hey, you answered that you wanted to lose weight, and we don't want you to get incorrect. So you want to have a backup path, let's call it, that is general and that can be sent to anyone that hasn't answered the pop-up question. And when you want to rejoin these paths, this can be quite tough. Okay, you have to do this, do this, do this. This was easy because we didn't have any emails at the end, okay? But yeah, whenever you want to merge paths, make sure you merge the paths before you add anything else down to the below the split. Okay, I can't really go back, but yeah. So, like I was saying, if you want, when you are creating conditional splits, if you want to merge, if you want the paths to merge, make sure you merge them like I just did, before you add anything else down the flow, or before you add anything else inside of these individual paths. Okay, and then again, you can add emails for each path. If this was a yes, they will receive this email. If this was a yes, they would receive this email again. And if it was a no, they receive another email. That's how you can create personalized messaging within the flow. And yeah, that's it. I'm going to have a separate video on how to A/B test flow. But yeah, so we've gone over email specific filters. Okay, now we have this cool set add past profiles. This is super cool because if you set up a new flow, let's say you set up a new welcome flow and you want all previous profiles that subscribed to your email list but did not purchase, you can click on this and it's going to add all of those profiles that match that criteria, and it's going to send them this flow to those guys, so that there isn't a missed opportunity because you launched your flow after they subscribed, right? By the way, you could have the best email strategy, but if you're landing in spam, it's just not going to work. We recently helped a client go from 14% to 46% open rate, fixing 3 deliverability mistakes they were making. Another brand jumped from 37%, which is an average open rate, all the way to 67%. And another client's bounce rate this time dropped from 36% all the way down to 0%. There's a free guide in the description that shows you the exact fixes. It will take you 20 minutes to implement, but it could change your email marketing forever. So yeah, I hope you've understood this. If not, you can ask me a question and I will answer it. Now, limitations of segment triggered flows. Like I was saying, segments are the most flexible trigger that you can use, because once you set up the flow and it's triggered by a segment and not a metric, you can freely change the definition of that segment, and the flow will automatically adapt to the updated definition of that segment, right? Whereas metric, once you select the metric, you can't change it unless you clone the flow and create a new flow. But the limitation is segment triggered flows will only send to first entrants, so profiles that enter for the first time. If it's a profile that enters for the second time, the flow is not going to trigger on them. You might be confused about why this even matters. It matters because for flows like checkout, the abandoned checkout flow, or the replenishment flow, you want these flows to have the ability to send again to the same person, right? You don't just want the flow to send one time and never send again. That's why we use metric triggered flows for flows that we want to for flows that we want I forgot my English, but for flows that you want customers to receive multiple times in the future, could be even after a year or 2 years. For those flows, you will have to use metric triggered flows. So yeah, that's the only limitation when it comes to segment triggered flows. Actually, I should add another one, which is segment triggered versus list triggered. So if segments are so flexible, why would you not always choose segment over list triggered flows? The reason is list triggered flows, for example, welcome flow is triggered by a list. That's what's the best practice, because list triggered flows are instant. When someone subscribes, they are instantly added to the list and the flow instantly sends to them, right? But a segment, it takes a few minutes to update. So for scenarios like this, where you want to deliver something to the customer or the subscriber as soon as possible, you will have to use list triggered flows and not segment triggered flows, especially if the segment is complex. Klaviyo takes some time to update the profiles in the segment and for the flow to trigger. So that's why you might want to choose list triggered over segment triggered. And Now that you know the downside and upside of each, you have the ability and the knowledge to create any flow you'd like at will.